Yeah, let's make sure they're both on. This one's not on mute. This one's on mute. So, okay, it's good. Testing. Do you want to make sure it's recording? It's good. Both of them are on. You want to put your headphones on? Testing. You good? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Thank you for joining us. We'll be going in this next part of this series with Shaykh Waleed. He'll be going over some of the works by Shaykh Ghazali from Ihya al-Ulumuddin, and I'll let him describe in more detail the specific content he'll be covering.
I have a suggestion. Why don't you guys come a little bit closer around this area here, and then we can leave that section a little bit for the sisters to be closer if they so desire. But watch the camera angle, that's all. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. So what I'd like to do now is read from, I think it's the last handout you have in your packet. For Imam al-Ghazali. And then I want you to turn 1, 2, 3, flip to the third page, the back end of it where it says page 289. Has everyone got it? Okay. So this section, I think, is from the chapter dealing with the Asrar al-Salah, the secrets of the prayer. And the first part that's included here is talking about Imam al-Ghazali's position that the khushu' and hudur al-qalb, yani presence of heart, is actually integral of the prayer. And he goes into quite an expansive discussion about that. He does bring up the idea that the fuqaha said that it's only required for an instant at the beginning, and he addresses that, and he said that he's talking more about an integral in terms of not the outward legal ruling of the prayer, but more of the inward sanctity of the prayer and how this is integral to it, and that he's addressing this. So it's kind of a lengthy discussion, and I thought it would be more practical for us to get into something more of the meat of the issue. So that starts on page 289. بيان المعاني الباطنة التي تتم بها حياة الصلاة. So the unwan, the chapter heading, Bayan, is making clear المعاني الباطنة, the inner meanings التي تتم بها حياة الصلاة, by which the life of the prayer becomes complete or perfect. Because he mentioned this in the first section, and also we read in the morning from Ibn Ata al-Sakandari that dhikr in general, and the prayer is a form of dhikr, the words themselves, the utterances of the tongue, are merely the outer shell, and that the inner life of the dhikr or of the prayer is its connection with the heart. And so that being the case, the real life of the prayer is its effect it should have on the heart, and the meanings that one gleans during their prayer, the meanings that come to one in the form of tajalliyat, and tajalliyat we said are spiritual realizations, or waridat. Waridat are pure type of khawatir, pure type of thoughts that come to you that encourage you to do good works or specific acts of ibadah or otherwise. So that's the real meaning behind it, and this is what he's going to get into here. So he says, أعلم أن هذه المعاني تكثر العبارات عنها ولكن يجمعها 6 جمل. Right, and this is the typical Ghazalian style, where he tells you there's so many things we could talk about and say about these things, and they're so almost innumerable. وَلَكِنْ يَجْمَعُهَا سِتَّةُ جُمَلٍ. But to summarize them, if we're talking about the usul, talking about the main roots of these things, there are 6. So he numbers them, he enumerates them. حضور القلب is 1, the presence of the heart. والتفهم, understanding. التعظيم, which would be to declare and understand that which is great to be great. الهيبة, which is more like reverence, respect, awe. الرجاء, hope. والحياء, modesty. So we're saying these are the meanings that should be completed in one's prayer. تتم بها الحياة الصلاة, that the life of the prayer comes to life. فلنذكر تفاصيلها ثم أسبابها ثم العلاج في اكتسابها. So let's talk about its details, their causes, and then the treatment about how to actually bring them about. So typical Ghazali in that has a very sabr and taqsim, as we say, style, where he gives you sort of the main points at the top, and then he goes into detail, and then he can actually يتفرع, he bring other points from that single point and so forth. So the Ahya is actually written in a way where you can probably make a very nice mind map out of it, a project that probably someone should undertake, hint, hint, where you take the main topics he's talking about, and underneath which he mentions several of them. So you could actually make a tree for each chapter, and you could probably do a lot with that. If it's too big a project, you can start with something like a smaller book of his, like Al-Arba'in fi Usul al-Din. He already divides that into 40, and then in those 40 sections, he does a similar pattern. So, أما التفاصيل, the first, the details of it. فالأول حضور القلب, as we said, the first is the presence of the heart. ونعني به, what we mean by it, أن يفرغ القلب عن غير ما هو ملابس ومتكلم به. So again, back to the theme of emptying, of تخلية. يفرغ القلب, to be heart to be emptied, عن غير ما هو ملابس له ومتكلم به. So that means you're only busy with what you're saying in the prayer. So when you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, your thoughts are busy with Alhamd, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, what does that mean? Maliki Yawmiddin, kada. So there's nothing else that you're thinking about. Not thinking about the movie you want to see tomorrow night, or thinking about what you need to buy for groceries, or what, how big your bonus is going to be this year. None of those things. What you're thinking about, only that. So عن غير ما هو ملابس له, يعني what he's busy with at the time of the dhikr, of the dua, ومتكلم به, what you're saying. فيكون العلم بالفعل والقول مقرونا بهما. تمام؟ فيكون العلم بالفعل, so the knowledge of the particular act of the prayer, والقول, and what you're saying, مقرونا بهما. So it should accompany the actual acts themselves. Follow the damir. So he says, فَيَكُونُ الْعِلْمُ بِالْفَعْلِ وَالْقَوْلِ. So what two things? الفعل والقول. The actual act and what you're saying. مَقْرُونًا بِهِمَا. والقران المقرون, يعني to be accompanied with, attached to. So the knowledge of those things that you're actually doing and saying is there present at the same time that you're doing them. In other words, you're very conscious of what you're doing, of the ruku', of the sujood, of the Fatiha when you're reading it, what you're saying during the sujood and the ruku'. ولا يكون الفكر جائلا في غيرهما ومهما انصرف الفكر عن غير ما هو فيه وكان في قلبه ذكر لما هو فيه ولم يكن فيه غفلة عن كل شيء فقد حصل حضور القلب. So the fikr, the thinking, the contemplation shouldn't be جائلا في غيرها, يعني من التجول, يعني taking a walk or a stride in other places that have nothing to do with the prayer. ومهما انصرف الفكر عن غير ما هو فيه, and as long as the contemplation is busy with other than what it is, but rather in his heart is dhikr for what he is busy doing, لما هو فيه ولم يكن فيه غفلة, and there is no state of غفلة عن كل شيء, from everything, فقد حصل حضور القلب. Then at this point you could say you have the presence of the heart in the prayer. حضور القلب. ولكن تفهم لمعنى الكلام أمر وراء حضور القلب. Now he gets into the second one. He said the first one was حضور القلب, presence of the heart. So the second one, if we're following the mind map, so at the top we have, the top of the tree, you have meanings that are important for the life of the prayer. We talked about حضور القلب, the details, حضور القلب, presence of heart. The second one now is التفهم. So he's saying they're two different, distinct things. ولكن تفهم لمعنى الكلام أمر وراء حضور القلب. It's something beyond just presence of heart, something more. فربما يكون القلب حاضرا مع اللفظ ولا يكون حاضرا مع معنى اللفظ. So perhaps the heart can be present with the word itself, but not present with the meaning of the word. That's possible, right? Because you can have a general idea, okay, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, I know those words. What does that actually mean, though? What should my heart be thinking about when I'm pronouncing those words? So that's تفهم. فاشتمال القلب على العلم بمعنى اللفظي هو الذي أردناه بالتفهم. So the idea of the heart is consistent with the meaning of the word that is being pronounced. That is what we meant by تفهم, by understanding. وهذا مقام يتفاوت الناس فيه. Right? And there's degrees in this particular stage we're talking about تفهم. In other words, it's not just like one level of understanding, خلاص, you got it. But there are levels. Could be little understanding, more understanding, most understanding. متفاوت, varying levels of understanding. إذ ليس يشترك الناس في تفهم المعاني للقرآن والتسبيحات وكم من معاني لطيفة يفهمها المصلي في أثناء الصلاة ولم يكن قد خطر بقلبه ذلك قبله. ومن هذا الوجه كانت الصلاة ناهية عن الفحشاء والمنكر فإنها تفهم أمورا تلك الأمور تمنع عن الفحشاء لا محالة. So we said it's a varying levels of understanding as people are not the same in their understanding في تفهم المعاني للقرآن والتسبيحات, whether it's the meanings of the Quran or the tasbihat, which would be the dhikr, subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, and so forth. وكم من معاني لطيفة يفهمها المصلي في أثناء الصلاة. He said, how many are the meanings, right, the generous and blissful meanings that the one who is praying, it occurs to him during the prayer, and it never occurred to him before outside of the prayer, when he was in the prayer. فنادته الملائكة وهو قائم يصلي في المحراب أن الله يبشرك بيحيى بكلمة مصدقة من الله وسيدا وحصورا ونبيا من الصالحين. So Sayyidina Zakaria, when he was praying in the mihrab, and the mihrab is just the prayer niche, the prayer area that he took as a prayer area, Zacharias. And then the Quran says he had made the dua beforehand for the son after he saw the miracles that were granted to Mary, where she had the food of the winter during the summer and the food of the summer during the winter. So he said it is possible that he too could have some of these miraculous things. So هنالك دعا زكريا ربه. It is here that Zakaria called upon his Lord. قال رب هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة إنك سميع الدعاء. Give me from a good طيب, pure ذرية إنك سميع الدعاء. You are the one who hears the dua. فنادته الملائكة وهو قائم يصلي في المحراب أن الله يبشرك بكلمة مصدقة من الله وسيدا وحصورا ونبيا من الصالحين يبشرك بيحيى مصدقا بكلمة من الله. That while he was praying in the state of prayer in the mihrab, the angels called him. That Allah we give you these glad tidings that you'll be given Yahya مصدقا بكلمة من الله, and he will believe in the word of God, whom Isa alayhi salam. وسيدا وحصورا ونبيا من الصالحين, and he's a sayyid, and he was husur, and that Sharia celibacy was something not blameworthy but rather commendable. وَنَبِيًّا مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, right, and a prophet from amongst the righteous people. So these ma'ani came to Zakaria while he was in the prayer. So the idea is ma'ani, meanings, can come out to what you're actually reciting, what you're saying, while you're in the prayer, when they may not come to you outside of the prayer. And remember, Ghazali affirms this. كم من معان لطيفة يفهمها المصلي في أثناء الصلاة. في أثناء الصلاة, during the prayer. ولم يكن قد خطر بقلبه ذلك قبله. And it never came to mind, never came to thought before that. ومن هذا الوجه كانت الصلاة ناهية عن الفحشاء والمنكر. And it's from this respect, this aspect, that the prayer prohibits fahsha and munkar. What's fahsha and munkar? Some people say fahsha is al-fahsh min al-qawl. In other words, despicable sayings, and al-munkar is despicable acts. In other words, from both deed and word, things that are blameworthy and not to be done. So the prayer is supposed to prohibit those things. In other words, if you are really doing the prayer right, you're not supposed to fall into them. Right? According to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, مَنْ لَمْ تَنْهَهُ صَلَاةُ عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ فَمَا ازْدَادَ مِنَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا بُعْدًا. Whoever's prayer does not prohibit him from fahsha and munkar, then he has not earned anything from Allah except to be further away from Him, further away from God. Less taqwa, less God consciousness. So your prayer could actually be something against you, not for you, if it's not done with hudur and tafahum and really imbibing the meanings of the prayer. فإنها تفهم أمورا تلك الأمور تمنع عن الفحشاء لا محالة. Right? So when you have these tajalliyat, when you have these meanings come to mind, how is that compatible with someone who will say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and gets up and does all sorts of things? How could you have been really in the prayer and then immediately after or sometime after you go and do these all sorts of things that are completely incompatible with a real prayer, with a prayer of presence? So we talked about التفاصيل, the details dealing with حضور القلب and the tafahum. Now he's moving on to التعظيم, the third one. أما التعظيم فأمر وراء حضور القلب والفهم. So he's going in a graded manner. In other words, this is even higher than the first two. So ta'zim is more than just understanding and more than just presence of the heart. فأمر الوراء, it's something more than حضور القلب. إذا الرجل يخاطب عبده بكلام هو حاضر القلب فيه ومتفهم لمعناه ولا يكون معظما له فالتعظيم زائد عليهما. So he gives an example that's particular to his time, but we can also understand. For the man who is speaking to his servant or his slave with words that he is aware of what he's saying and the understanding of what he's saying, وَلَا يَكُونُ مُعَظِّمًا لَهُ, but he doesn't have this ta'zim of what he's actually saying. فَالتَّعْظِيمُ زَائِدٌ عَلَيْهِمَا. Ta'zim is more than just presence of mind or heart and understanding what you're saying. And I would say here the word I would be looking for in this case, the implication of what you're saying. Right? And that happens a lot. Like, he uses an example of the servant because the servant is one who is likely to get abused. And that's what I think he's talking about here. So when you say something to a child or to someone you are in a position of authority over, and you say in a way like, you know, what happened here? How did you leave this big mess? Go clean it up before I, you know, take a whooping to you or whatever people say, you know, before I punish you. So he understands what he said and he's cognizant of what he said, but he didn't understand what the implication, the effect that would have on the person he's talking to. There's no ta'zim of what he said. He didn't understand the gravity. That's the word I'm looking for. The gravity of what he's saying. So the gravity, understanding the gravity of what you're saying, the ta'zim of it is something more than just you being aware that you're saying it and that you understand what you're saying. That's another level altogether. So then he goes on to al-hayba. So we went over حضور القلب. He went over tafahum, understanding, ta'zim. Now al-hayba. And our guess is al-hayba is going to be something even more than ta'zim if he's following the pattern that he's came before with. So أما الهيبة فزائدة على التعظيم. Right? Za'ida means more than ta'zim. Not just understanding the gravity of what you're saying. What's this hayba then? What's that? بل هي عبارة عن خوف منشأه التعظيم لأن من لا يخاف لا يسمى هائبا والمخافة من العقرب وسوء خلق العبد وما يجري مجراه من الأسباب الخسيسة لا تسمى مهابة بل الخوف من السلطان المعظم يسمى مهابة والهيبة خوف مصدرها الإجلال. So الهيبة, هاب يهيب هيبة, means to be in awe of something. زائدة على التعظيم. It's more than just mere تعظيم. بل هي عبارة عن خوف منشأه التعظيم. So it's a type of fear. منشأه التعظيم. What's in منشأ? It means its root. Right? أصل النشأة, we say, you know, how was he raised, where did he came from, what are his roots? So the root of it is تعظيم. So the root of this هيبة, it's a type of understanding the gravity of something. تعظيم. لأن من لا يخاف لا يسمى هائبا. Because someone who is not afraid, or at least some element of fear, is not to be said in awe. I think that holds true in English too. Right? Shock and awe, is that what they said before? So there's like a fear element involved. So hayba means there's a little bit of the fear element. It's not pure fear, it's not a naked fear, but there's an element of fear. والمخافة من العقرب وسوء خلق العبد وما يجري مجراه من الأسباب الخسيسة لا تسمى مهابة. Here he makes a distinction. So being afraid of the scorpion or the bad manners and behavior of your slave or servant and things like this من الأسباب الخسيسة. الشيء الخسيس يعني something that is kind of you could be afraid of it, but it's trivial in of itself. You know, I might be afraid of getting stung by the scorpion, but the scorpion is not really a big deal. But I could be afraid of it. So it's kind of trivial in of itself. Amr al-Khasis. And also the bad character of someone of my household or the servant or whatever it might be. بل الخوف من السلطان المعظم يسمى مهابة. But rather the fear of a great sultan, great authority, right, who is he's not trivial of himself, he's also great. هذا يسمى مهابة. This is what's called hayba or mahaba, to be in a state of awe from this thing. والهيبة خوف مصدرها الإجلال. So hayba, it's a type of fear whose source is ijlal. And ijlal means to be in awe of this thing and to think actually it's great, so great that it doesn't really have any deficiencies. There's no weaknesses to it. Like when we say Allahu Azza wa Jal, same word, Jal here. Jal means يعني يجل الله سبحانه وتعالى عن جميع النواقص. He is above and beyond having anything that's what can be considered a weakness or a deficiency or anything. All of that's inappropriate for him. So ijlal means to make something jaleel. Right? Because ijlal is which form? Coming from what? Yes, very good. Ijlal. Ajallahu yujillu ijlalan. So those are the four. Now it goes on to the fifth. أما الرجاء فلا شك أنه زائد. So hope here is more than the first four that came before it. It's more than just presence of the heart. It's something more than tafahum, understanding. It's more than ta'zim. It's more than hayba. It's more than those first four. It's a fifth. What is it? الرجاء, hope. Hope. فلا شك أنه زائد. فكم من معظم ملكا من الملوك يهابه أو يخاف سطوته ولكن لا يرجو مثوبته. والعبد ينبغي أن يكون راجيا بصلاته ثواب الله عز وجل كما أنه خائف بتقصيره عقاب الله عز وجل. So he said, how many are the great kings from amongst the kings that are feared and are in awe of, especially satwatuhu, yani the repercussions of crossing them. People are afraid of that. وَلَكِنْ لَا يَرْجُو مَثُوبَتَهُ. But at the same time, they have no hope that they can actually be rewarded by such a person. وَالْعَبْدُ يَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَكُونَ رَاجِيًا بِصَلَاتِهِ. And it is a must that the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be hopeful with his prayer for the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كما أنه يخاف بتقصيره, just like if he is remiss or with his negligence, he fears the punishment or the wrath of Allah Azza wa Jal. So there's a fear factor, no pun intended, but at the same time you have the hope, the raja. And that's the difference between a pure naked fear of something that can hurt you, but also has this feeling of hayba and ta'zim. أما الحياة, which is the last one, the sixth one. فهو زائد على الجملة. يعني جملة هذه الأشياء. جملة means sentence, it also means this list of things. So it is more than all of these things mentioned before. لأن مستنده استشعار تقصير أو تقصير وتوهم ذنب. ويتصور التعظيم والخوف والرجاء من غير حياء حيث لا يكون توهم تقصير وارتكاب ذنب. So modesty, الحياء, is more than all of these. لأن مستنده استشعار تقصير وتوهم ذنب. Because it's mustanad, that which it leans upon, what what you can say, its fountain, what it leans upon. Istish'aru, the feeling that you are negligent, the feeling that you're not doing enough, and also the feeling that you might be a sinner, you might be committing sins, even though you may not be. But haya means that you have the fear of falling into it. You're shy, you feel shame that you would be seen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala committing something He did not want you to commit. ويتصور التعظيم والخوف والرجاء من غير حياء. Right? And you can picture, you can conceptualize ta'zim and khawf, fear, and raja, hope, without modesty. Right? Because someone can be hopeful for someone's reward and he's not modest in the way he's asking about it. And he could be afraid of someone and not be modest in the way that he interacts with them. But modesty is something more. حيث لا يكون توهم تقصير وارتكاب ذنب. Because in those, there is no idea that I might be negligent, I might be remiss, or I might be committing a sin. So those are the six that he mentioned that are the fountainhead meanings of the ones that should be somewhat accessible or we should strive to in the prayer. وأما أسباب هذه المعاني, because remember he said in the beginning tafasil, details. Now he's going to talk about asbab, the causes that bring them about. How do I go about having modesty and reverence and hayba and all of these things in my prayer? What do I need to do? وأما أسباب هذه المعاني الستة فاعلم أن حضور القلب سببه الهمة. So if you want presence of heart in the prayer, what's its sabab, what's its cause? Al-himma. And himma means aspiration. فإن قلبك تابع لهمتك فلا يحضر إلى فيما يهمك ومهما أهمك أمر حضر القلب فيه شاء أم أبى فهو مجبول على ذلك ومسخر فيه والقلب إذا لم يحضر في الصلاة لم يكن متعطلا بل جائلا فيما الهمة مصروفة إليه من أمور الدنيا فلا حيلة ولا علاج لإحضار القلب إلا بصرف الهمة إلى الصلاة والهمة لا تنصرف إليها ما لم يتبين أن الغرض المطلوب منوط بها وذلك هو الإيمان والتصديق بأن الآخرة خير وأبقى وأن الصلاة وسيلة إليها. So he goes into somewhat of a lengthy discussion here about himma and how one could be apprised of it. So he says, your heart, فإن قلبك تابع لهمتك. Your heart follows your aspiration. فلا يحضر إلا فيما يهمك. So it's not going to follow except in those things that you aspire to or that are important to you. That sounds like pretty common sense. But it's more than common sense. Because it means that it's not just an intellectual exercise. Right? And Ghazali, another part of the Ihya, he talks about niyyah, about intention, and he talks about al-ba'ith, which is motivation. And intention, motivation are not the same thing. And he sees that the pinnacle of sincerity, ikhlas, is when your intention coincides with your motivation. How are they different? I can, for example, I intended to come here tonight I made my intention, well, I want to see the brothers and get together and so forth and all of that. But perhaps it's not my motivation. In other words, the motivation is if you were to, given a scenario where this particular thing that motivates you is no longer there, and then you lose your himma to go. So I say I'm intending to go visit the brothers and so forth, but what's really motivating me is I was promised this grand dinner afterwards. So I know to get to the big dinner, I have to come and, I already ate, by the way, just an example. So Shaykh calls me and he says, you know what, the dinner's not going to happen, but we'll see you at 7. And then when I put the phone down, I'm like, if I feel like less himma to do it, less aspiration, then it's clear to me now that my motivation is not the same as my intention, right? Because I was motivated by something else, even though I'm trying to tell myself my intention is this. So your motivation is what your heart follows. It's what your heart wants, right? And as they say, the heart wants what it wants, right? And it's true. And it's not easy to change the course of your heart. You can't really change that easily who you love or what you like or what you dislike. You find that it's just an inclination that you have. But Al-Ghazali is talking here about some asbab, some things that can be done to change the course of that. But true himma, true hudur is not going to happen unless you have that in your heart to begin with. You can want it, you can desire it, you can intend it, but it's not the same as it being something as almost become a part of you, a natural part of who you are. Hence the importance of dhikr. Right? Dhikr is repetitive. It's done constantly over and over. Why? Because you're training yourself. And we believe that people can be trained, and they can be trained to be different people altogether. If we didn't believe that, then what's the point of religion? What's the point of deen? Right? If the way you were born and the way that you were nurtured as a child and teenager, and then you grow up, and then that's who you are, and then you can't change after that, then what's the point of all this? And just like we can train animals, to use sort of, a vernacular example, the horse and the dog can be trained to do tricks, and the horse, you have to break him in. The same thing with a human being. Can also be trained. So the himma is that which really pulls you to where you want to go. So he said that's one of the key asbab, one of the key causes to having those 6 that are mentioned before is to have the aspiration. Yes?
You mentioned the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Is the niyyah more intellectual, like the aql? Like mentally you've decided what your reason is, but the heart may not be aligned with your intellect or your mind. I'm just not quite grasping, is a deeper level where the disconnect happens.
The intention or the niyyah is, I would say there's sort of like an ideal aspect of it, and then there's the more realistic aspect of it. So the ideal aspect of it will definitely coincide with what should be motivating you. You can say, I intend to do this, I intend to do that, but it may not be the real intention, the real reason, right? So the motivator, or what Imam al-Ghazali calls al-ba'ith, is what actually drives you to do what you do. And when that coincides with what the sincere intention should be, then you can say this person is sincere. But when they do not coincide, then sincerity is elusive, because there's really another reason that's motivating, not the stated one. Not even the stated one to people, but to yourself, right? Because you can actually kid yourself as well. إنما الأعمال بالنيات فمن كان هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله. The Prophet states it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he says, whoever's hijrah is to Allah and His Prophet, then his hijrah is to Allah and His Prophet. He's not repeating here. He's saying, if they coincide, the true intention, you really are doing it for Allah and His Prophet, then that will be seen and counted and treated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you did it. You did do it for Allah's Prophet. And then he says after that, وَمَنْ كَانَ حِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى امْرَأَةٍ يُصِيبُهَا إِلَى أَرْضٍ يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ امْرَأَةٍ يُنْكِحُهَا فَحِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. But if it's some other reason of dunya that he wants, or to marry a woman, then فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. Then his hijrah is for that which he has made the hijrah for. So we tend to think of intention as this very fiqhi thing where, okay, I intend to make Umrah, I intend to make Hajj. That's the fiqh meaning of it, that you have to state the intention or at least have it in the heart before you actually do it. But the hadith to me, I think, is talking about what we're talking about here, the motivation, the real intention, why you're doing something. So the why you're doing something, what drives you, that's the real intention. Whether you call it motivation, ba'ith, niyyah, kada. Yes?
Participating in the discussion could be a second one. So, could we look at intention and motivation in more than one?
You can have more than one intention, or you can have more than one thing motivating you, and they could be in degrees, right? So, and that you can tell, like at a certain point, okay, no dinner. And then he calls back and he said, well, you know what, there's actually going to be 4 people there only. I'm like, well, okay, that's a letdown a little bit. Then he calls back and says, it's always actually going to be me. And I said, well, barakah, alhamdulillah. But he said, you know what, I can't make it either. Can you just go and just sit in the room and do it? My motivation probably at this point will be like 0, and I might not even show up, right? Because there were several reasons. But when all of them go away, then it's kind of nothing left for me to be motivated by. I'm giving you an extreme example, but when we talk about things that in general should be, the motivator behind it should be to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't accept other intentions with it. And that's when we talk about, is your intention pure and sincere, or is it not? So sincerity also is varied. Some of the ulama said, some of them were a little more extreme. They said, either you have the intention or you don't. If you have any other intention besides it, then it doesn't count. And that's kind of an extreme position. And there are others that said, no, it's commensurate with the level of that particular, you could say, well, I'm 90% for Allah and I'm 10% for the dinner. Some would say in theory that can happen too. Like there is a little, but then that 10%, it's an impurity. It's what's called the sha'ibah. So it's like, it's not pure honey. There's a little bit of impurities in it. Still might taste good, but it's not the best stuff. So when you want to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to bring your best game. You don't want to have these other minor intentions that kind of can color it and impure, make it impure. So.
His lifestyle was, he used to fast almost 30 days of a month or something like that, right? So when you're in that state, you don't care for food, right? Because you don't eat it. So how realistic is it for an average person to try to get to that level of, awareness, consciousness, spirituality in everyday life? So how do you take that?
Ghazali wasn't talking to everybody in this book or in most of his books. He was talking to people who've already kind of are on board with the idea. He does try to convince you in some places of why this is important, but he's not trying to preach to people who have rejected seeking a path in this manner. So what he is trying to do is to show them, look, this path that you're seeking here, this is the path of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he's clear in saying it's not an easy one, it's difficult. And he's also clear in saying it's not for everyone, because he does talk about the whole awam and khawas al-khawas paradigm, which talks about what's kind of acceptable for the common Muslim, and then the elite Muslim and the elite of the elite amongst the Muslims. And he does go and have that type of understanding. So he doesn't say that this is for everybody or you have to do this, but he's speaking to a specific group of people who are seekers, the ones who are kind of already trying to go towards that path. And I think he's also speaking to himself, because he was someone who was trying to do that himself. So we were with the himma. So the himma, he said, فَإِنَّ قَلْبُكَ تَابِعٌ لِهِمَّتِكَ. So your heart follows what is your motivator and what you're aspiring to. فَلَا يَحْضُرُ إِلَّا فِي مَا يَهُمُّكَ. So it's not going to be around your heart, present, except in those things that are important to you. وَمَهْمَا أَهَمَّكَ أَمْرٌ حَضَرَ الْقَلْبُ فِيهِ شَاءَ أَمْ أَبَى. How true is that? How true is that statement? وَمَهْمَا أَهَمُّكَ أَمْرٌ حَضَرَ الْقَلْبُ فِيهِ شَاءَ أَمْ أَبَى. And as long as you're busy thinking, like it could be you're distressed with something or you're happy with something, as long as it's important to you, your heart will always be present in it, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not, right? If you have like this big thing you have to do, you have this big presentation you have to do, or you have a big test coming up, or getting married soon, and you know it's taking a lot of your thought. You try to put the thought out of your mind and not think about it, but you can't, right? It's still there. Why? Because it's important to you, and that which is important to you, you're going to be thinking about, and you're going to be present in it. So it's not impossible, he's showing you, for you to channel that ihtimam, channel that concern into things that you should be concerned with, things that should be important to you. Then it becomes a natural part of who you are, right? Because there's a way to practice the deen that's kind of, it's commendable. I mentioned this, I think, in the khutbah the other day. It's commendable where you practice the deen based upon an acquiescence, on an istislam. You kind of accept things, even though you may not understand why and your heart might not be in it, which is an initial stage. But then there's a way to practice the deen where it's part and parcel of who you actually are. You do it with, and it's not burdensome. It's do it because the motivator behind it is you want it. You want to do it. You can't wait for the prayer to come. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, he would tell Bilal, أَرِحْنَا بِهَا يَا Bilal. Right? أَرِحْنَا بِهَا. Call the prayer because this is where we find our raha. جُعِلَتْ قُرَّةَ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. Right? The delight of my eye has been made in the prayer. In the prayer itself, I can find that because I find the ma'ani. He didn't say جُعِلَتْ قُرَّةَ عَيْنِي الصَّلَاةِ. He said فِي الصَّلَاةِ. It's two different things. Because had he said the delight of my heart or my eye is the prayer, then it would be the prayer itself. But it's what he finds within the prayer. In other words, the prayer is a means, and the ma'ani, the tajalliyat, the divine manifestations, the waridat that come in the prayer, هذا هو المقصود. That's what we're looking for. And when people start to find that, then they want the prayer. You know, why do people find prayer burdensome? Because it feels like calisthenics to them. It's yoga, right? It's the Muslim yoga, yani bodily exercise, up, down, get up, leave, and they leave and come and go like nothing happened. Nothing changes in here, but it should change something in here, right? Every time that you leave and you go to the prayer, you come and and leave, then it should be something has increased within you, or something of that should be removed has been removed, right? Because if you still have a lot of things that need to be cleaned up inside, then the prayer will do that for you. If you get to a point where now you're not just cleaning things up inside, but you're actually planting the garden, right? Then you're getting increased. Every time you go to the prayer, it's an increase. فهو مجبول على ذلك ومسخر فيه. مجبول من الجبلة means it's a natural inclination. No one can avoid this. That which what they're concerned with is important to them, their heart will follow. والقلب إذا لم يحضر في الصلاة لم يكن متعطلا بل جائلا فيما الهمة مصروفة إليه من أمور الدنيا. So Ghazali gives us a ray of hope. He says, if the heart is not in the prayer, that doesn't mean the heart doesn't work. Right? He didn't say it's muta'attil, like, your spiritual capacity is, is used up and it can't. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying, بل جائلا فيما الهمة مصروفة إليه من أمور الدنيا. Rather, it's busy with other things, thinking about other things from the things, the matters of dunya, too busy to think about the prayer. So your heart works. In other words, a receptacle, it knows how to have presence in things, but the things it cares about. So you have to make it care about the salah. You have to make it care about the prayer. Just like you make it care about, the shiny new car or the, whatever that is that people are concerned with, or paying the mortgage or the rent. Just like you're concerned with those things, make it concerned with what is most important, the prayer. فلا حيلة ولا علاج لإحضار القلب إلا بصرف الهمة إلى الصلاة. So there's no trick you can do, حيلة, ولا علاج, or treatment, لإحضار القلب, to bring the heart, the presence of heart in the prayer, إلا بصرف الهمة إلى الصلاة, except by redirecting or directing your aspiration, what you gauge to be important, towards the prayer. والهمة لا تنصرف إليها ما لم يتبين أن الغرض المطلوب منوط بها، وذلك هو الإيمان والتصديق بأن الآخرة خير وأبقى، وأن الصلاة وسيلة إليها. فإذا أضيف هذا إلى حقيقة العلم بحقارة الدنيا ومهما تاه حصل من مجموعها حضور القلب في الصلاة. So he says, how do you go about doing this? He says, وَالْهِمَّةُ لَا تَنْصَرُفُ إِلَيْهَا, the himma, your aspiration, will not go towards the prayer, ما لم, as long as يتبين أن الغرض المطلوب منوط بها, as long as it's not clear that the main objective of all of this, of your life, of everything, is connected with the prayer. Your whole existence, why you're here, what you're supposed to be doing here, is closely tied with the prayer. He said, unless you understand that, then you will not give it the importance it should be given. Manutun biha. So your whole existence, your whole haya, your dunya, everything, it's sort of the microcosm of it is within the prayer. That's how important it is. وَذَلِكَ هُوَ الْإِيمَانِ. Why? Because that's the iman. The prayer is part and parcel of your practice as a Muslim, which is you being a mu'min, a believer. وَالتَّصْدِيقُ, and believing in, holding to be true and real, that the akhirah khayrun wa abqa, that the akhirah, the next life, is better than this life, and of course longer lasting. Wa abqa. وَأَنَّ الصَّلَاةَ وَسِيلَةٌ إِلَيْهَا, and that the prayer is a means towards it. So the fuqaha, they have this qaida, this principle, they say, مَا لَمْ يَتِمُّ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِبْ كَذَلِكَ. So that which is obligatory, right, that's understood, but something else that leads and aids into performing the obligatory, that thing is also obligatory. So if I can't accomplish something that's obligatory except with this thing I have to do as well, well, that thing I have to do as well is also obligatory. So if I can't, for example, my prayer is not accepted unless I face the qibla or I try to face the qibla, then facing the qibla becomes wajib too. If the prayer is not accepted except if I'm in a state of tahara, right, from all the physical and the ritual forms of tahara, purity, then that means those things are also obligatory for me to have. So if akhirah is what I really want, and the salah is one of the main means towards it, then I should really understand how important it is. فإذا أضيف هذا إلى حقيقة العلم بحقارة الدنيا. So if you add this to the knowledge of how trivial the dunya is, right? Not just that the akhirah is khayrun wa abqa, but think about how trivial all of the stuff that people are busy with, competing with, vying with another, and all these things that really have no meaning, that don't count for much. Definitely not in the next life, and very little in this life. وَمَهْمَا تَهَا. No, that can't be right. ومهمهاتها نعم حصل من مجموعها حضور القلب في الصلاة. And then understand the importance comes from this majmu'ah, all of these ideas that came together. Then you can have the presence of mind within, or the presence of heart within the prayer. وبمثل هذه العلة يحضر قلبك إذا حضرت بين يدي بعض الأكابر من لا يقدر على مضرتك أو منفعتك، فإذا كان لا يحضر عند المناجاة مع ملك الملوك الذي بيده الملك والملكوت والنفع والضر فلا تظنن أن له سببا سوى ضعف الإيمان. So he said, وَمِثْلِ هَذَا الْعِلَّةِ, and according to this illah, to this reason that we just mentioned, knowing that how great, important the prayer is and that it's a way towards the akhirah. So he's giving an example. If your heart is present, if you are sitting in front of someone of the akabir. Akabir here means someone who's like in a position of authority, the big boss, or someone who you think has the ability to influence your life, right? But he's a created being just like you. And when you stand before them and you're like nervous and you're quite present what you're saying, like the job interview, right? You're very careful not to fiddle with your phone and with your clothes and things like this, and you want to make a good impression because you believe that person in front of you is interviewing you has an ability to influence your life, whether you get the job or not, right? So if you find yourself that you're having presence of heart when such a situation, and you don't have the presence of heart when you're praying, then he's saying, know that the reason for this is none other than that your iman is weak. ضعف الإيمان. Right? So he was going back to the idea that iman can increase and decrease. So you can accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is لا إله إلا هو الواحد الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد, all of the attributes and names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you quite are well acquainted with that He created you and to Him you shall return. On an intellectual level, you accept all of that. But if your iman doesn't get to a level that is strong enough that you actually act upon that, and the prayer itself becomes important to you, then that's a weakness in iman, according to Imam al-Ghazali. فاجتهد الآن في تقوية الإيمان. So work towards strengthening now your iman. وطريقه يستقصي في غير هذا الموضع. But he said actually the way to do about increasing your iman, we don't talk about it in this section. That's something else. But he's talking about here the secrets of the prayer. Then he moves on to التفهم. So التفهم, as we said, was not just حضور القلب, but understanding of the meanings. So now he's going to talk about the asbab, the reasons, causes, how we can get to it. فسببه بعد حضور القلب إدمان الفكر وصرف الذهن إلى إدراك المعنى. So its cause, after presence of heart, إدمان الفكر, to perpetuate your contemplation and to occupy your intellectual thoughts to the particular meaning that you're trying to understand while you're saying it. وعلاجه, how to go about doing it, ما هو علاج إحضار القلب مع الإقبال على الفكر والتشمر لدفع الخواطر وعلاج دفع الخواطر الشاغلة قطع مواردها. So he said the way you go about doing it is similar. It's the same thing when we talked about having the presence of mind in the prayer. In other words, is to realize that your himma has to be following you. Your heart will follow your himma. So if you have a himma and aspiration for understanding the meaning, right, and it's important to you, then you'll find a way by which to do it. مع الإقبال, in addition to, along with الإقبال على الفكر, to approach thinking, contemplation, والتشمر لدفع الخواطر, and also figuratively rolling up your sleeves, getting busy and serious, لدفع الخواطر, to repelling extraneous thought and ideas. And we talked about خواطر before. وعلاج دفع الخواطر الشاغلة قطع مواردها. How do you stop these خواطر, these extraneous thoughts? You cut them off at the source. قطع الموارد, cut off at the source. أعني النزوع عن تلك الأسباب التي تنجذب الخواطر إليها وما لم تنقطع تلك المواد لا تنصرف عنها الخواطر. فمن أحب شيئا أكثر ذكره فذكر المحبوب يهجم على القلب بالضرورة فلذلك ترى أن من أحب غير الله لا تصفو له صلاة عن الخواطر. So he said cut off its sources, and its sources are, one source is the things that you take in, that you let into your heart, the things that you see, the things that you hear, and those become the things that you think about. Certain things you see them, you can't unsee it, and you may find yourself busy the rest of the day, perhaps even week, thinking about it. Certain things you hear, right? Particular tune or something, and then it's like can't get out of your head, and it could be like a day or two before you do. These things are also type of, so you have to stand guard and be careful about what you let in. In other words, cut them off at the source. So he says here, فَمَنْ أَحَبَّ شَيْئًا أَكْثَرَ ذِكْرًا. So whoever loves something, they will remember it and they'll think about it much and they'll recall it. فَذِكْرُ الْمَحْبُوبِ يَهْجُمُ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ بِالضَّرُورَةِ. So something that you love, يَهْجُمُ عَلَى الْقَلْبِ. مِنَ الْهُجُوم. He even puts it in a manner like it literally attacks your heart. That which you love, you're definitely going to be busy with it, thinking about it. Whether it's a person, a place, an idea, a dream, right? If you love that thing, you're going to be busy thinking about it. And in fact, you're not going to be busy thinking about it. You're going to be busy about thinking about how you can get close to it and what you need to do to reach it. If you love it, if you truly do love it. فَلِذَلِكَ تَرَى أَنْ مَنْ أَحَبَّ غَيْرَ اللَّهِ لَا تَصْفُ لَهُ صَلَاةٌ عَنِ الْخَوَاتِرِ. And it's for this reason, is for those who love other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their prayer does not become purified for them. لا تصف له صلاة عن الخواتر. They're always thinking about something else while they're praying. وأما التعظيم. So now he goes on to the ta'zim, which was the third one, right? فهي حالة للقلب تتولد من معرفتين. إحداهما معرفة جلال الله عز وجل وعظمته وهو من أصول الإيمان. فإن من لا يعتقد عظمته لا تذعن النفس لتعظيمه. So the ta'zim, he says, it's a state of the heart that comes about from two distinct knowledges or two distinct things that you need to know. معرفة. إحداهما, one of them, معرفة جلال الله عز وجل وعظمته. Knowing the gravity, how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His azama. Really, imbibing that. وهو من أصول الإيمان. And is from amongst the foundations of Iman even. To really understand the azama, the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فإن من لا يعتقد عظمته لا تذعن نفسه لتعظيمه. So whoever doesn't believe that Allah is azim, then how can his soul succumb itself to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if he doesn't believe it to begin with? So that's why it's from usul al-iman, it's from the foundations of iman. So sometimes people may have issues with their aqidah, sometimes issues with their very understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what He is capable of, and things that deal with creedal issues. الثانية, the second one, معرفة حقارة النفس وخستها. And this is knowing حقارة النفس, how trivial and actually despicable the nafs, the lower soul, actually is. وكونها عبدا مسخرا مربوبا حتى يتولد من المعرفتين الاستكانة والانكسار والخشوع لله سبحانه فيعبر عنه بالتعظيم. And if you look at these two things, it's very similar to what some of them said, من عرف نفسه عرف ربه. Whoever knows himself or herself, then they know their Lord. And this is one of the meanings that it's pointed by that. In other words, if you know your حقارة النفس, if you know how really trivial you are in the whole scheme of things compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have an understanding of how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Because the greater Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes to you, the smaller you become to yourself. Right? People who have big egos and fall into narcissism, very rarely they're going to be God-fearing people or even think about God to begin with. Because they don't have room to think about anyone else being great except themselves. But people who are modest, who are humble, and see their position in the cosmos in relationship to the creator of the cosmos, then they understand, well, really, I'm not that big a deal. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And any good that comes about is from Him. And I'm just merely, if I'm lucky, I get to be a receptacle of that good. That's all I can hope for. وما لم تمتزج معرفة حقارة النفس بمعرفة جلال الله لا تنتظم حالة التعظيم والخشوع، فإن المستغنى عن غيره الآمن على نفسه يجوز أن يعرف من غيره صفات العظمة ولا يكون كالخشوع والتعظيم حاله، لأن القرينة الأخرى وهي معرفة حقارة النفس وحاجتها لم تقترن إليه. So I'm just going to summarize what he said here. Basically what we just said, if someone doesn't understand their own triviality in relationship to everything else, then they also, that's not going to be enough just to have ta'zeem of Allah. You need both. To understand the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand your own trivial position in relation in order to have proper ta'zeem. Because you might say, well, Allah is great and I'm great too. And actually that happens with religious-minded people a lot. So they have this, what we can say, this ta'zeem of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you can say they love Allah and they're trying to do the right thing, but at the same time they have this love of themselves also. And they see themselves as great. And in fact, when it gets to its worst aspect, they see themselves as kind of an extended arm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what they do, you know, it's what Allah wants. And when they push that on other people, that's when we get into this, you know, sanctimonious type of attitude people have. You know, I'm a representative of God. And this is where a lot of religious extremism comes about. And I think, in my opinion, most of it, a lot of it has to do with improper or lack thereof, period, spiritual training. And part of the spiritual training is telling you, hey, you know what, you're not a big deal. It's great that you pray tahajjud and you pray 5 times a day and, you know, you made hajj 64 times, but that's not a big deal, in the larger scheme of things. And you should be humble before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those things that you have been given. Not to use it as a type of hammer that you bang over other people's heads to show how religious and how important you are. So Ghazali said it's not going to happen unless you have those two understandings. إجلال الله وإحقار النفس. أما الهيبة والخوف, so he includes these two together. Or actually هيبة is by itself, خوف is part of it. فحالة للنفس تتولد من المعرفة بقدرة الله وسطوته ونفوذ مشيئته فيه مع قلة المبالاة به وأنه لو أهلك الأولين والآخرين لم ينقص من ملكه ذرة. هذا مع مطالعة ما يجري على الأنبياء والأولياء من المصائب وأنواع البلاء مع القدرة على الدفع على خلاف ما يشاهد من ملوك الأرض. So the hayba and the khawf, the reverence and the fear, it's a state of the nafs. تتولد comes about from, literally means to be born from, if you want to go by the literal Arabic, but that wouldn't make sense. So تتولد comes about from من المعرفة بقدرة الله, from the knowledge of Allah's qudra, His capability, what He can do. وسطوته, right, and even His ability to destroy. ونفوذ مشيئته, and His ability to carry out what He wills. فيه, in you, مع قلة المبالاة به, right, with really Allah is saying that it's not a big deal for Him to, to destroy everything, just as He created everything, and it was His will to do so. Then it's just as easy for Him to take away everything, and you should keep that in mind. So you shouldn't feel amin, shouldn't feel too safe. Well, no, I'm too great for that to happen. I'm helping so many people, that would really be a big blow to them if Allah would take me now, so I think I'm going to stick around. La, who are you kidding? That's not how it works. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. He is not asked about what He does, and we are asked. So if He were, for example, to destroy al-awwalin wal-akhirin, all of the ones who came before, all the ones who came after us, لم ينقص من ملكه ذرة. It would not take anything away, not even Adam's worth from His kingdom. Doesn't decrease it in any way whatsoever. And this also هذا مع مطالعة ما يجري على الأنبياء والأولياء. So if you read about the masa'ib, the calamities, the anbiya, the prophets went through, and the awliya, and continue to go through, then and all of the different trials and tribulations, and Allah could have had the ability to remove that from them, but nevertheless they went through it, then you should feel like, well, this can possibly happen to me as well. And this should give you an idea of hayba and fear, awe and reverence for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وبالجملة كلما زاد العلم بالله زادت الخشية والهيبة وسيأتي أسباب ذلك في كتاب الخوف من ربع المنجيات. So he said in general, as much and it's commensurate with your knowledge increasing with Allah, that your khashya and hayba also increases. So that means if you feel like your knowledge is increasing, but you're not really growing in humility and reverence and awe of Allah, then you're doing it wrong. It's the wrong type of knowledge, you're taking the wrong manner, or it's not really knowledge. You think it's knowledge, but maybe you've just, honed your debating skills and you call it knowledge, but it's not knowledge, because it should increase you in humility and in fear. وأما الرجاء, hope, فسببه معرفة لطف الله عز وجل وكرمه وعميم إنعامه ولطائف صنعه ومعرفة صدقه في وعده الجنة بالصلاة، فإذا حصل اليقين بوعده والمعرفة بلطفه انبعث من مجموعهما الرجاء لا محالة. And the raja, you have to think of raja or fear and hope as kind of two opposites on a scale. So if you overdo the fear aspect, you might fall into a state of despair. Say, well, subhanAllah, like Allah took away Thamud and Ad, and I'm no better than those people, and we're all doomed, and look at the world today, and nothing's going right. And, this whole state of despair can come about. But that has to be balanced with raja. And he puts the raja higher, right? Because he puts them in order. So the hayba, which is a form of type of refined fear, let's think of it like that. So hayba is a refined fear, not just a naked fear of like a animal that can hurt you, but a refined fear with ijlal. Then raja, hope, is a higher place than that, because now you're hopeful for Allah actually taking you out of the calamity you're in, or avoiding it from you completely, and hopeful for His reward. Right? This keeps you in it. So he says, raja, it's knowing the lutf of Allah, knowing His gentleness, wa karamihi, and His generosity, wa amimi in'amihi, and the general bestowals that He bestows upon people, wa lata'if sun'ihi, and His gentleness in His dealings with people, wa ma'rifati sidqihi fi wa'dihi, and knowing that He is truthful in His promise to us, paradise, bis salah, for those who have iqamah of salah, they were promised paradise. فإذا حصل اليقين بوعده, so if you have a certainty in His promise, والمعرفة بلطفه, and also you have a knowledge of His lutf, of His generosity and His ease, انبعث من مجموعهما, then you will get from those two groups of sets of requisite knowledge, الرجاء, then hope comes about. لا محالة. لا محالة means definitely, if you understand those two things. And then the last, which we want to finish with, أما الحياة, or modesty, فباستشعاره التقصير في العبادة وعلمه بالعجز عن القيام بعظيم حق الله عز وجل، ويقوى ذلك بالمعرفة بعيوب النفس وآفاتها وقلة إخلاصها وخبث دخلتها وميلها إلى الحظ العاجل في جميع أفعالها، مع العلم بعظيم ما يقتضيه جلال الله عز وجل، والعلم بأنه مطلع على السر وخطرات القلب وإن دقت وخفيت. وهذه المعارف إذا حصلت يقينا انبعث منها بالضرورة حالة تسمى الحياة. So modesty, باستشعاره التقصير, realizing that you are remiss and negligent in your ibadah, in your devotional acts, and knowing that you are incapable of doing and giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His just due. No matter what you do, you will never repay the debt. That's impossible. So you're not actually trying to do that. But your recognition that you cannot repay the debt, that you can never do enough, this is what Allah wants from you. That's al-matlub. That's what you're seeking. وَيَقْوِي ذَلِكَ بِالْمَعْرِفَةِ بِعُوبِ النَّفْسِ. How can this feeling of haya, modesty, get strong? Knowing the deficiencies of your own self, your mistakes, your shortcomings, and knowing that it's the difficult path, it has to sincerity, it's not very sincere, and that it looks towards instant gratification and the easy pickings. Our nafs likes things like that. الحظ العاجل, as he said, في جميع أفعالها, and all that it does. مع العلم بعظيم مقتضيه جلال الله, and also with the knowledge of the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the knowledge that He sees everything. He sees the secrets, and He sees the whisperings of the heart. وإن دقت وخفيت, no matter how small and how precise and how subtle they may be, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees all of that. وهذه المعارف إذا حصلت يقينا انبعث منها بالضرورة حالة تسمى الحياة. And all of these ma'arif, all of these spiritual realizations, if they come about with certainty, yaqinan, certainty. Remember, we go back to in the beginning, he said, if the prayer is not happening for you, then it's probably da'f al-iman, weakness in iman, which means a weakness in certainty. So getting the level of certainty in these things we're talking about here, then you'll have this thing called haya, called modesty. فهذه أسباب هذه الصفات وكل ما طلب تحصيله فعلاجه إحضار سببه. So these are the reasons, the causes we have talked about in these 6 attributes, and all of those where we cite a specific treatment about it, then you have to find the cause. That's what you should be seeking to bring about the particular desired outcome that we talked about here. I guess there's just 2 sentences left. فهذه أسباب هذه الصفات كل ما طول تحصيله فعلاج وإحضار سببه. ففي معرفة السبب معرفة العلاج، ورابطة جميع هذه الأسباب الإيمان واليقين. أعني به هذه المعرفة التي ذكرناها، ومعنى كونها يقينا انتفاء الشك واستيلاؤها على القلب كما سبق في بيان اليقين من كتاب العلم. وبقدر اليقين يخشع القلب، ولذلك قالت عائشة رضي الله عنها: كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحدثنا ونحدثه فإذا حضرت الصلاة كأنه لم يعرفنا ولم نعرفه صلى الله عليه وسلم. So all of these things, the thing that ties them all together are from the causes are iman and yaqeen, as we said, iman and certainty. أعني بهذه المعارف التي ذكرناها. So all of these ma'arif or realizations we talked about, the ones we just mentioned. And what we mean by certainty in them is having no doubt whatsoever in any of them. وَاسْتِيلَاؤُهَا عَلَى الْقَلْبِ. And then these meanings taking over the heart. كما سبق, as was talked about before in another chapter. وَبِقَدْرِ الْيَقِينِ يَخْشَعَ الْقَلْبِ. So according to the level of certainty, then the level of khushu' or presence of heart on your part will be commensurate with how certain you are of these haqa'iq, of these realities. And this is why Aisha radiallahu anha said, may Allah be pleased with her, said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to speak to us and we speak to him, but then if it came for the time for the prayer, it was if he didn't know us and we didn't know him. So we'll stop here. Maybe we'll leave some time for questions or discussion or something. And one thing I'd like to point out with all of this is that you might ask, well, okay, I understand all that you said and, having these realizations and all that, but how do I get that? How do I go about doing that? And the thing is, we need to have living examples before us, really. Because I think part of the da'f al-yaqeen, part of having the weakness in certainty is we kind of accept it theoretically on a theoretical basis, but I've been asked numerous times, some people say like, yeah, did people really live like that? Did they actually, what he's talking about here, did they do that? And, and alhamdulillah, I can say, I know it because I've seen it. Not because I've read about it, but I've seen it. I've seen people do stuff like that. I've seen people live like that. I've seen people, these ma'ani, these meanings that they're talking about here, actually embody them. So I know it's possible. And they say, seeing is believing, right? And in Arabic, ليس الخبر كال No. كالمعاينة ليس الخبر كالمعاينة. So hearing, khabar here means hearing about something. So ليس الخبر كالمعاينة, hearing about something is not the same as actually seeing it, as actually experiencing it. So, we need to have serious tarbiyah for ourselves, to begin with, and for our children and generations that are coming. And we have to sort of have a project. We are reconstituting the idea of what a human being actually is. A human being is not the sum of what he accumulates. He is not his job or her job. He is not the amount of political influence they have. That's not, all those things are not human being. Human being is this. Human being is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Human being is the inner strength and character. That's human being. So we have to reorient ourselves and those around us and those we love and our families to what really is important. And none of the stuff around us is that important in terms of what's being pushed as what's important to us. It means nothing. There will come a day when all of this will be gone and all of this will be barren and nothing will remain except Allah's countenance. And then we'll have the real certainty. But you can still avail yourself of this if you live towards the path of Muhammad ﷺ. If you align yourself with the path of Muhammad ﷺ, then you will avail yourself of not regretting on that day when there is absolute certainty, but it wouldn't have changed anything for you because you already knew that. Just like Sayyidina Ali when he said, if the Jannah and the Nar were put before me, I actually saw them, مَزْدِدْتُ يَقِينًا, I would not be increased in certainty because I already know they're there. I've seen them in my heart. I don't need to see them with my eyes. So we need to see these things, maybe sometimes with our eyes, see people like this, and then we could see them, inshallah, with our heart. Wallahu al-musta'an. Jazakumullah khair. Any questions, comments? Ismail.
So I wasn't able to come for this part, majority of this. I did have a question though. Okay, it kind of goes back to the previous reading that we did earlier today. I just thought about it on the way here. For the people that I've had a chance to study with, the theme has always been, of course, moderation and consistency in terms of maybe a portion of Quran that you read every day, salawat on the Prophet that you do every day. But I've always wondered, is there a preference in dhikr outside of the obligatory salah that one, let's say you're struggling and reading some Quran, setting aside some time to do some muraqabah or some muhasibah or something that they should go to, only because a lot of times, like Ramadan comes, a lot of people don't want to, like sing Naat and Nasheed and these things, and then they end up doing a lot of that, and you're like, well, maybe you should have done that in Tahajjud, like some people, to help guide people in terms of what they should be doing with their time, what would be more preferable, I guess?
What should one occupy oneself's time with outside of the things that we've mentioned?
Outside of the obligatory, like salah, what type of dhikr would be better to do? Like, is it more reading just Quran as dhikr itself, or praying more tahajjud prayer? Or?
It depends upon the person. But something that's independent of the person is we should strive to make the adhkar that are based upon occasions. So entering the house, leaving the house, entering the masjid, leaving the masjid, these things we should make it part of who we are. That doesn't depend upon the person. But depending upon the state of the person, if we want to take it from like sort of beginner to intermediate, advanced type of paradigm, beginners, everyone should have a wird of Quran, but the real benefit from the Quran may not come out to people who, like Al-Ghazali said, are busy, their himma is busy with other stuff. Because the Quran is generally seen as tahliyah. So Quran gives you, right, but you have to be prepared to receive. The Quran may not be the most powerful, effective, purifying agent, right, because its ma'ani are deep and concentrated and many, and they don't come out, right? They don't appear, they don't manifest to you unless you're ready to do that. You're ready to accept them. So someone who's kind of busy with like a lot of stuff, images and things like this, our scholars, they recommend that they work more with dhikr, especially al-ism al-mufrad, for example. Just saying Allah. Right? Allah, Allah, Allah. Allah, just lafz al-jalala is a way to remove a lot of the impurities. Because it's dhikr takhliya. It's to remove stuff. It makes you prepared. Then La ilaha illallah also. La ilaha illallah has both aspects, takhliya and tahliya. But lafz al-mufrad actually consistently, right, helps in doing that. People who have a problem with images, especially people who've been exposed to like something like pornography and they have problems still getting rid of that, then we recommend to them that because people tend to want to associate an image with whatever they're saying, and you can't picture Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we tell them, try to picture the written lafz al-jalala. Right? Even if you have a picture of it, that's okay too, but try to picture that when you're saying Allah, 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 and picture that being imprinted on your heart. If people have the image association issue. And then after a while, you won't need it. It'll become more of a natural thing. So that's just one example. But depending upon, there are the practitioners who are well versed in this. These are just some things I heard, but they're the ones who can actually, when I talked about prescription dhikr before, they're the ones who can prescribe what the person actually needs depending upon their state and where they're going. So, yes?
I have a question about how to balance all of this that you read about Waleed then the need to go out into the world and interact with people and connect business and do that kind of thing. Because if you take this humility and you take it and then try to act like that in all your interactions with everybody, then won't you just get taken advantage of?
Humility is more a state of the heart than it is a state of the limbs. I can still be a completely humble person, but when I go into the job interview and they say, why should I hire you? And I say, well, because I'm the best for the job. I still could be humble, even though I said that, because it's a state of the heart. Right? But what the limbs do, as long as I am not actually imbibing that within my heart, if I actually believe I'm the best for the job, like Sayyidina Yusuf said to Al-Aziz, اجعلني على خزائن الأرض إني حفيظ عليم. He said, I am hafiz, I am trustworthy, and I am alim, and I know. And those are the two, and incidentally, those are the two most important things for any job anyone's going to do. Their trustworthiness and their kafa'a, their, what's it in English? Competence. And their competence. Can they do the job? Right? And Musa alayhi salam, when one of the daughters of Madian said to her father Shu'aib, she said, أبي استأجر إن خير من استأجرت القوي العليم. القوي, يعني he is competent and he is knowledgeable. القوي الأمين, عفوا. القوي الأمين. He is strong, competent, and amin, he is trustworthy. So humility is a state of the heart. And this is not, we're not telling people like, retire to Mount Vernon or something like that, and isn't that Thomas Jefferson's house, right? And just, be far away from everybody and, go into a permanent retreat and, make dhikr in the mountain. And you could do that, but that's not what we're advocating here. It's, living, don't go to the monastery, but make the monastery in here, right? So it's kind of a type of solitude amongst the multitudes. So the heart is alive with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though the Prophet ﷺ, towards the end of his life, he had always had people with him. He probably never had a moment alone. He was always amongst the people, but his state was never higher, even though he was amongst all of those people. And in the beginning of his career, he used to go to Ghar Hira for a month at a time. And towards the end, he did less and less of that, and more he was with the people. But at the same time, his heart was never more alive. So don't think of the two as kind of contradictory, they're not. Does that mean, though, we don't need an occasional break, like retreat? Of course we do, because modern life is taxing. And sometimes you need to just recharge, decompress, and you need to get away. A weekend here and there once in a while, yeah, of course. So, but not as a permanent way of doing things. Yes.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Malcolm Gladwell.
Uh-huh.
But,
I am.
So he says on average it takes roughly
10,000 hours
to
yeah.
be proficient at something. And I was kind of thinking about Salat, and we talked about perfecting some aspect of our daily lives. I feel like certainly with me, I might lose sight of something. But then kind of reading Malcolm Gladwell's philosophy of 10,000 hours, I was wondering if there's any correlation between that and our faith and the way we practice. It was just an idea that I had of the kind of
No, I agree with the concept. Definitely, practice makes perfect. It's true.
Yeah.
What do you think dhikr is? Dhikr is, there's a constancy and repetitive to it. The prayer, there's a repetitive and constancy to it because it's changing who you are. That's the whole idea to begin with. It's supposed to change you. And that may not happen except with a level of dedication and or repetition that is continuous. So, whether it's 10,000 hours but this does not preclude that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can actually take you places in a night, in an instant. Maybe the regular mode of things is for most people, yes. But if Allah so chooses, and He has done with some of His slaves, His servants, that He's taken them in an instant. Just like that. And that can happen. And we should always be hopeful of such things. We never claim them. We don't say, oh, I'll just wait for that moment. But we know that al-qudr al-ilahiyya salihah, that the divine omnipotence can do that. And so, we should never disallow it. But we work at the same time, even though we hope that might happen. Yes?
So we talk about this nafs, right? So I'm always confused between the nafs and the ruh and fitra. In my understanding, maybe you can correct me. Fitra is this light in your heart of goodness. So whenever you do something negative, it's always bothering you. As I said, there's that goodness in your heart once you. And nafs is more like a conscious, which is, I know people call it self, soul, psyche. And then ruh is what was blown into us, right, when we were created, which is like a spirit. So when you die, the ruh is gone. But what happens to the nafs?
Right.
Maybe you can clarify these things.
There's some different opinions, but I tend to favor Ghazali's opinion where he says they're pretty much synonymous, except they are addressing different aspects of the same haqiqah, the same reality. So that thing that makes us distinctly human is obviously not our outer forms, because just like us, animals also eat and drink and procreate, and we do the same thing. And so it's not the physical form that makes us who we are, but what's something that can't be seen even. What is that thing? Call it ruh, call it nafs, call it aql, intellect, call it spirit. Any of those things, Ghazali uses them, and he said they're all kind of pointing to the same thing. In other words, haqiqat al-insan, the reality of the human being. So sometimes we use nafs in an aspect of when we're talking about sort of the lower, baser motivator that seeks us out from us to follow our appetites. That's an aspect of the word nafs. Ruh generally is not used like that. Ruh is generally used for higher spiritual aspects, not used in that light. Al-aql also, which means intellect, but intellect is a key aspect of the makeup of the human being. But it's generally used to indicate that which kind of is able to reflect and rationalize and understand cause and effect relationships and things like that. So they kind of all point to the same thing. And the ruh is a mystery. Right? Even the Quran says so. قُلْ رُوحٌ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. So no one really knows, no one can pinpoint. They even had the theologians have a long discussion on where is the ruh. Is it actually connected to the body? And the Enlightenment philosophers have the same discussion. Kant has his own opinion, and so does Rousseau, and some of, Rousseau is like it's actually near the pituitary. But the Muslim theologians, they said that you can't actually pinpoint where it is. We believe there's a connection to the physical heart, right? Because the Quran says, Al-qulub allati fi sudur, the hearts that are within the chest. So there's some type of connection, but what type of connection, exactly how, kaif, no one really knows. but we perceive it. We know it's there. So we have a certainty that it's there, but the nature of it, that is something that we leave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, there's other opinions, and you'll find it used in different ways, but that's at least the Ghazalian approach as far as my understanding goes. Yes?
So going back to what you were talking about earlier, if after any period of voluntary, involuntary retreat from the world, or from employment, for example, going back, you feel physically or actively a change in your connection with Allah. How do you, does that mean you need more, to get yourself more?
You always need to, there's no end.
I guess to balance what's the priority to engage with the world, or putting that to others, as opposed to working on yourself.
They're not mutually exclusive. You can be engaging with the world and also working on yourself. You don't necessarily need to go physically away. And you're always going to be feeling like, I'm not doing enough. Once you feel like, oh, I did enough, then you're in the wrong place. But if you always feel this taqseer, this negligence, and you feel you're not doing enough, that's actually a good sign. That means you are not happy with where you're at. And it's kind of the paradigm where you should be content with your circumstances, but not content with yourself. So content with circumstances that I don't really control, like, what type of salary I have and where I live, and who are the people around me and things like that, and what my IQ is, and those are your circumstances, right? And those are things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigned to you. And so al-rida bil-qada, right, is being content with these particular set of circumstances Allah has given you. It doesn't mean you don't try and change them, but in your heart you have an understanding that they've been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas when you look into yourself and your own spiritual development, you should not be content with yourself. Ghazali and others, they say, al-rida an al-nafs ad-da' al-idal. It's the incurable disease if you're pleased with yourself. Because once you become pleased with yourself and you have ujb, that's actually the mistake of shaitan. That's why shaitan is who he is. Not because he's a jinn, because there's believers amongst the jinn. Minna as-salihun wa minna duna dhalik, right? They said that about themselves. But he is who he is because his takabbur, and because he thought himself to be something he's not. He said, Ana khayrun min, I am better than him. Khalaqtani min narin wa khalaqtahu min teen. You created me from fire and you created him from clay. How could you ask me to prostrate before that inferior being? So shaitan's mistake, he slipped because he thought himself to be something that he's not. And he used his intellect in a way that was completely erroneous, and he didn't recognize the divine command before him. So, and he was pleased with himself, right? He said, I've been worshiping with the angels 5,000 years here, and you just create this thing out of clay, and all of a sudden we're supposed to not worship it, but prostrate before it. No humility in his ibadah. Where's humility there? Who are you making ibadah to? Who are you worshiping for the 5,000 years before that? Wasn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He's asking you to do this now. So we have to be careful not to also fall into the idea of being pleased with ourselves and, I'm okay where I'm at, and, I'm in a good place. I have rida of my circumstances, but myself, I always feel like I can do more. Yes?
There is a book that I read about, it's about for habit, and it says that the mind is, so efficient, and it kind of automates the things that we do, and when we do them, it just becomes so efficient that we can do it, and at the same time do so many other things. It just creates that space for us, and there's a tendency for people, I think, to kind of see the prayer like that, and I've seen that maybe reciting different types of verses in different salas might make it new, so your mind doesn't go somewhere else. And I was wondering if there's anything, how there's a recommendation for the ulama.
No, definitely. If you're reciting the same surahs over and over again in your prayer, then you should change that. You need to be reciting different surahs, right? Because like you said, it does make a renewal of it. And you'll just be, if you make the prayer just merely habitual, like a habit, then it's not going to have the effect that, that it should. You do it because you do it. You're not really sure why. But when you approach the prayer as a transformative event, you have 5 of them in the day, and you treat each single one of them, this event has to transform me in some manner. And I'm looking towards that. It's not just a habit of mine. And that means I'm going to do everything that I can to make it a transformative event. And there are things that even the Prophet ﷺ did in that manner to make it more, and to show people how it can be transformative. Why do we pray in masajid? What's a mosque? It's a place just to pray, right? Because this is like an edifice, a building that's there to help you make that prayer a transformative event. Why do we pray in a particular direction? Why do we have to have our particular parts of our body covered? Why do we have to wash up beforehand? All of these things, which are precursors to it, are just as important to make it that transformative event. And so what you recite, even how you recite, this whole science of tajweed, what's that? All it is reciting in the same manner, the same way that the Prophet ﷺ recited with, in the way that he took it from Jibreel alayhi salam. Again, it's another piece of the puzzle to make it a transformative event. And so you should be trying to memorize at least different surahs and saying different ones, and not always saying the same surahs in each prayer, inshallah. And also to, if you're praying in the house, you should try as best you can to set aside a particular place that you offer the prayer to build some consistency. Because if you just pray anywhere, that doesn't help. It kind of has an opposite effect. But if you have a corner in the house or a room or something like this is the prayer area, which most people do, then that helps a lot too.
Just wanted to thank Shaykh Waleed. He'll be back with us, inshallah, in the morning from 9 to 10:30 for his last and final session before he travels. This program in Allentown tomorrow. So busy weekend for him. So please keep him in your dua. Also, wanted to recognize Brother Jafar is back with us. He's also from the Allentown area. He teaches Arabic there and planning to study more. So welcome him back to the program. And also we were talking about behind the scenes. I'm actually here doing MC, not by choice, but because Sophia here, who's the lead for the program, likes to work behind the scenes. And so we just wanted to, everyone, support her and what she's been doing. She's been, doing a lot of work, not only during the program, but for weeks before, to get the program set up with the schedule, with the housing arrangements, a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. So we really like the spirit of everyone kind of coming together. Part of the reason we wanted to make the dinner yesterday semi, potluck that we can contribute to is that we want to create this feeling in which everyone feels part of the program, and that one way to do that is, whoever's given lead over us, like Sister Sophia for this program, that we support her in any way we can. So I'm MC because she asked me to, not because I wanted to, and so others, if we can all take some role, even though we have a couple of days left, especially as we wind down. It's going to get a little tight with, if, some people may be preparing for final presentations or any sort of, quizzing or just a departure or cleaning up, making sure the facility is clean. If we can all pull together in that and take Sister Sophia's lead and guide, you can ask her if there's anything that she needs help with. Lastly, just please make dua for the Fairfax Institute. There are partners in this program. Brother Armin was here at the very beginning. He's the director to welcome you all. Inshallah, he'll also be there at the closing. And this beautiful facility that we have used is normally not allowed to be used in the weekends and evenings, but they made an exception for us, and there's cost involved with that, cleaning costs, there's heating costs, there's a number of other costs that they've, they're putting up to serve, this common goal that we have of educating and enlightening the community, inshallah. So please make dua for them. If you ever see any of the people at IIIT or the Fairfax Institute, Sister Zainab, you may see her around, Brother Armin, anyone else basically walking into those office areas there. They do great works. You can see the books that have been published. Please do thank them for all their hard and quiet work they do as well. So Jazakallah khair, and we hope to see you all tomorrow.